going to like this video, and even for me it's a hard one to film, but we're going to be talking about forgiveness, how I've learned to forgive, and not necessarily even how I've learned to forgive, but how God has taught me to give. And it's an interesting one because this mentality, especially with the people that I've seen and how I used to carry myself, forgiveness is a very weird thing, right? It's almost like a submissive thing, and it's just not, it wasn't in my register for a very, very long time. Someone did me dirty, it was a case of, right, I'm going to get them back, I'm going to get them back tenfold. We see all these different types of quotes, these mentality pages, and always focusing on, if someone's done you dirty, you should rise up, become mega successful, and spite them in their face. And I carried that mentality forwards for a very, very long time, and it formed a lot of the energy that I was using to approach my days. And whilst I'm always growing and I'm always moving forward, I can tell you now there is no upside to that mentality. It may not be as harsh and as relentless as I had it. You may just want to be, if someone does you dirty, you just want to get them back and be over and done with. You may believe in karma, right? There is no upside to any of this whatsoever. I can't tell you all the answers, right? I don't have all the answers, but one thing I can tell you from where I'm sat right now, if you can learn to forgive, it's one of the most liberating and freeing feelings that you will ever do on your journey, hands down. I've got stories to tell you, and we will get into them, but I want to understand, even if we have to take religion aside from this, let's just think in a real world point of view. When someone has done you wrong, when you are a victim in a certain situation, could be a physical, could be emotional, could be psychological, could be whatever. The worst part about this is it's probably going to come from the people that are not meant to be doing these things. And the stories that I'll tell you is from the people that was meant to have my back, be there for me. So for me, learning to give was a very uncomfortable period of time. It was a hard thing to go through, but coming out the other end of it, through that change, that transmutation, I've been able to let go of it and just disregard it. You need to understand that your mind is only, it's infinite, but it's also finite in the sense that you can only process a certain amount of thoughts. Those thoughts require energy each and every single day. So if you're moving forwards with your life and you've got all this resentment, all this hatred for other people that have done you wrong, it's just like carrying a weight that only gets heavier the longer and longer that you hold it, because you've got those feelings of hatred and whatever someone has done to you, paired with this life that you're trying to build for yourself to become a better version of yourself. And if you are religious, trying to grow as a Christian, having this weight is going to hinder your growth every single day, and it's going to keep weighing up and up and up, and eventually it's going to implode because it's something that you carry internally, because we're talking about emotion. So I cannot get across a point, the fact that there is just no upside to having this mentality. You need to break free from it, and you essentially need to be born again, which is a symbolism of baptism, right? So when you are in these situations, I didn't really get to finish my point. These people will still be going to sleep, they'll still be waking up, they'll still be able to go about their day. We all have consciousness, right? We know right from wrong. Some people are less in tune with it, some people are more in tune. But the point I want to make here is, you will always be the villain in someone else's story. So even in those situations where you have done something wrong, if you was to sit face to face, look them in the eyes, they'll somehow be able to warp that story where you are the bad person in that. So it's all a matter of perception, because if they can see that situation one way and you're seeing it another way, you're always going to be headbutting each other, and it's never going to move forwards. That's why sometimes people can have beef for years on end. People will go to the ends of the earth, depending on which sort of section of society. And if you're in a gang, if you're in a job, people will die over this, people lose jobs over this, all over this mental construct that has no upside whatsoever. So learning to forgive is going to allow you to break free from that cycle. And one of my big things in life is, if you want different, you have to move different. So if you're able to watch this video right now and think, I've got a lot of hatred and a lot of stuff that I've been holding on to, it's a perfect chance to break free from the mold, cut yourself off from that, and start to walk in the path of light, the path of God, and allow Him to actually guide you to let go of the very thing that's holding you back. So how did forgiveness actually help me? Now, where I grew up, and we don't necessarily have to go into the true technicalities of it, but I grew up in a sense where there was people that was meant to sort of fill that parental role, people that were meant to be very, very close friends, and there were situations that happened where maybe perhaps money stopped coming in, because obviously I grew up in care. There was times where girls came into it, and then the guy would then lose all morals because he had no sense of purpose, so he needed the woman to fill that role for him, and as a result our friendship detrimented. There's been all these different instances where these people have done me wrong, and I registered that. And there were two things in life. When a situation happens, you do two things. Always, always, always two things. You either react or you respond. And if you are reacting, you're always going to be a slave to that situation and to that person. Whereas if you respond, it's learning to pause, it's learning to let God take the lead, and then from there you can create a more calculated response that's going to allow you to move forwards and not be a victim to it. Someone can control your emotion, someone can control your thoughts, they can control your energy. They then control your energy, they then control your actions determine your reality. If you are letting someone get access to this level of you, they can quite literally control your quality of life. And I have lived that life. So going back to the people that essentially did me dirty, I had this vendetta, and it was so much of a magnitude of emotions. It was vengeance, it was viciousness, it was violence, not necessarily violence in a physical sense to them, but violence of like, I carried this attitude of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to achieve all my goals. I've always been a driven and ambitious person, and I had all these goals, but it was at the root of it to spite them. So simple thing would be, someone's done me dirty, I had this, this cool vision in my mind. I was going to get my dream car, and I was just going to go drive to them, and I was just going to drive past their house, and they'd see me in their car, or maybe I crossed paths with them and they'd see me, and in that moment I'd then have this, so I thought, sense of peace that I'd gained control over them, I'd proven them wrong, I'd spied them, I'm like, I'm better than you. It was always a quest to be better than these people, because if I was better than them, it showed them that I'd got payback and that they was always below me. So you can see right from the start, this is not a healthy mindset to have, and also it served me no benefit whatsoever, because even in this situation, even in this moment right now, those people are still living, they're still going about their day-to-day basis, they could not care less. And if you was to ask them, I'm probably the villain in their story, right? And rightly so. You've got to be the villain in someone's story. It's just the way that it is. This mindset stayed with me for years and years and years. It almost like became attached to me. And it was how I thought. I just thought that was the way. Someone had done me dirty. It's fine. It's cool. Eventually you'll see, and you'll see that, you should have stuck by me. And then I'd have all these people coming to me, and I'd be like, they'd be wanting to be a part of my life, but now I've made it. So I thought, I'd then get to have the power to turn them away, and I said, you know what, you did me dirty, so you don't get to sit with me anymore. And it was this viciousness of just wanting to prove people wrong. It literally just ate me up inside. And it was only recently, we're talking like a year ago, right? So very, very infancy stage that I've been able to just let go of this. And it started off very lightly. So what I used to do, and what I always do, is I keep a journal. So you can sort of see behind me, I've got my library, so to say. About 300 books right now. 1,000 is actually what counts it as a factual library. And each of my sections is split into different stuff. So we've got like spirituality, esoteric, stuff like that. We've got stoicism to the top. We've got religion, we've got some psychology. And a lot of the books that I would read would be essentially geared towards helping me master different aspects of myself. And it's grown over time, you can see how it's matured. But I've always kept a journal. And what I would do is I would keep a journal, and I would sort of look at what I've been thinking about today, what's been bothering me. And one of the things that started to shift very early on was that I found that in my mental space, these visions were occupying less and less in my mind. And I was thinking about, what do I want to do in life? What does my ideal version of me look like? What kind of life do I want to be living? Typical stuff that we would journal about. But one of the early signs of forgiveness was that it was encountering my mind less and less. I had less of a desire to prove people wrong. So that was the early stage, and then I started to feel a lot more freer. I found myself thinking clearer, because if you think about it, when you're trying to prove people wrong, that is still, even if you're not in the same city with them, because I ended up moving city, wasn't even associated with them. Some of these people I haven't seen in probably coming close to 10 years now, right? Maybe 5 to 10. So even though we're not in a different city, completely different postcode, they're still occupying my mind, and they were still controlling it, which is just giving up an entirety of myself that just was not deserved whatsoever. So journaling was allowing me to audit my thoughts and start to think. I'm thinking of these things less now, so it's beginning to control my thoughts less. Now I've started to get bandwidth. You can only process so many thoughts per day. Your mind we're infinite beings, we're obviously made in God's image, but at the same time, you can only process a certain amount of thoughts per day. So we're on average around 70,000 thoughts a day. So if you're carrying, and I know I mentioned at the start of this video, if you're carrying all this hatred, this resentment, and this idea of you just want to prove people wrong, it's occupying so much of your mental space, it's going to hinder you in actually making the decisions to move forwards and do the things that you want to do. So now I had all this free space. So now I was thinking, I can start thinking better. I started coming up with new ideas, launched new business, started to get into new opportunities, new things started to come to me, new blessings. I was able to handle hurdles and actual challenges a lot more better, because usually it used to be that situation had happened, I'd held on to all that resentment, but then another challenge would come up just day to day, as life usually does, and then I'd be like, right, well, it's their fault, it's another thing now, so now I've got even more of a villain arc to be just more and more vicious. But because I started to be more free, I was able to approach these challenges a lot more easier. Simple one as another story would be, I crashed one of my first cars, and at that time, this is when the forgiveness aspect was starting to come in. I was able to handle that, and within 3 months I had another car, but it was a much better car, it was a much nicer car, it was not necessarily going down the material aspect, but I was able to navigate through that unusual and unwanted situation with a much clearer mind, because I was more rooted. I understood what decisions needed to be made, I understood how to respond to that situation as opposed to react, and I was free from all this stuff that had been holding me back and pulling me into my past. So when you can start to think more clearly, you create this open space, you can start to be still. One of the recent videos I focused on was focusing on stillness rather than idleness. When you're idle, you'll start to think about past situations. You'll start to think about things that held you back, things that hurt you, things that bothered you, and it will start to fill up your mind, and it will poison you like a literal disease. So if you can learn to be still, you'll understand how to navigate better, how to make the right decisions, and how to actually allow God to come in and take the lead. So that's a little bit about the stories and how I've been able to navigate through it. The earlier stages were what basically tipped the first domino. When it started getting into the deeper aspects, it was envisioning conversations, because there's never really a need, maybe there will be, for our paths to cross these people, right? But the aspect here was envisioning these situations where I could look the people in the eye and just say, I forgive you. And it was whilst it wasn't real, it was still emotionally real in my mind. So I've been able to look these people in the eye and essentially say, I forgive you, no hard feelings, it's whatever, right? Because even in those situations, looking back now, and sort of how I've grown, there was probably stuff that I did wrong. There was probably stuff that I could have done a little bit better. So then I started to have these visualizations where I was able to look at these people, forgive them, and just hold no resentment whatsoever. All of these powerful emotions that I mentioned at the start were no longer in my register. So at the start we focused on how forgiveness was just not a thing that I understood, and yet now I've been able to flip the script where resentment is not in my register, but now forgiveness is. So now I've been able to be a lot more clearer, a lot more driven in the sense of how I'm able to move forwards in life, but it's allowing me to open up new opportunities. Because now when I'm focusing on forwards and what I want to do, what I want to build, what my purpose and legacy will be, which is of course through God, the idea now is it's much more authentic to me. One of the biggest shifts that I've just found is that I'm able to think and I'm able to create a life that is authentic to me. It's not necessarily about this fast lifestyle and all these big flashy things. It's more so about, what does that ideal version of Josh want? What does that most rooted life look like? And it's complete opposite of what I used to think, which is the most insane feeling, because for a long time I didn't know what it is that I actually wanted. Something was always missing. So forgiveness will actually allow you to realign with your purpose, understand your values more, and just give you the stillness to actually think. The world moves very fast, so it's hard to keep up and just be still with yourself sometimes. Everyone's always mourning that they don't get a minute with themselves, they don't get a chance to breathe, but that's because they're idle too many times and the mind's just racing with all these thoughts of, why did that person have to do me like that? There'll be people that will literally just sit and spend time. They'll struggle to sleep, they'll come into health issues, just wondering why did it have to happen like that? Things happen, and whatever happened, happened. But if you can learn to actually forgive, and it doesn't necessarily have to be you doing the work, all you have to do is be still and God will do the rest. But so many people have blockages. They are not willing to let go of the thing that's hurting them. It's basically Stockholm syndrome. So when someone is kidnapped and they are basically taken hostage for a long period of time and they live in captivity, when they are released, they actually end up basically defending their captivator, if that would be the right word. And it's Stockholm syndrome because they've spent so much of their time around them. So it's a very similar link here, because what happens is people have got all this negativity, all this hurt that they wanted to hold on to, but yet they don't want to move forwards. Because it's become so much a part of them, they end up defending the very thing that's eating them away, because it's all they've ever known. And humans want comfort, they want familiarity, they want to know that when they wake up the next morning, everything is going to be as is, right? And there's actual conditions and sort of like mental issues where people will have this and it will form a part of their identity. None of these things are healthy, but it's only when you can actually learn to be still that you'll learn to actually forgive and move forward to these things. So we're going to wrap it up there in terms of where we end this video. I hope there's been some wisdom for you, and I hope that it can at least tip the domino for you to start learning to forgive as well.